Rahm Emanuel, welcome back to ChinaTalk.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. What a year for U.S. Asia policy it has been.
That's the understatement of the year.
We started out, I remember asking you questions about, oh, look at all this nice stuff you guys did, rebuilding alliances. Japan and South Korea are friends again.
Yeah.
And now we've got all this.
Yeah. How did we do it so quickly downhill? Is that what you wanted that?
We now have a year-long sample size of Trump 2 taking a very different take, both from Biden and Trump 1, and really, I would say the past 70 plus years of U.S. foreign policy when it comes to relations with our treaty allies. I don't know. What's it been like watching this, Rob?
Well, it's depressing. It's like infuriating. There's a lot of other emotions. Look, it starts from a premise. China's view is they're the rising power. America is receding, and either get in line or we'll give you our full China coercion policy, everything. Our message is we're a permanent Pacific power and presence, and you can bet long on the United States. Unfortunately, I think everything President Trump's doing is underscoring China's message and, with a bunch of exclamation points because of the way we're behaving. When we were designing this, from President Biden, his team, etc., when he walks in 2020, China was a little bit on their front toe. Now when we left, they were on the back heel. They were angry at being isolated, and it took a strategy of rather than them isolating a Japan or isolating the Philippines, that through the United States, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, India, they became the isolated. We isolated the isolated. And they knew it, both on a political level, military level, strategic level. All our military exercises were multinational. Japan was the number one foreign direct investor in the United States and is a long pole of our policy there. We built an alliance which China thought could never be done, and part of their strategy could not be done, was between the United States, Japan, and Korea, which obviously has a history culminating in what we accomplished at Camp David. That was and remains China's worst nightmare. Trump was basically taking it off the page. We then extended it to Japan, United States, and the Philippines. And if you look at where the Philippines Islands are and you look at where Okinawa Islands are, their strategy as it relates to quarantine Taiwan becomes much more difficult to achieve. It had a strategic, political, and military level that was unprecedented. And then we had the Quad, double down on the Quad, which he had actually, to his credit, pushed along in the first term, and has taken a 35-year project of bringing India into kind of our orbit and totally expels them for Pakistan's vanity and what it looks like for Pakistan's economic gifts to the Trump family, the Witkoff family, and the Lutnick family. That's what it looks like, specifically the Trump boys. And so to me, at every level, and you are asking these questions at the very day that China's been trying to force, which they haven't done since 2010, Japan on an economic coercion basis. It took the United States almost 2 weeks from the get-go to finally do a B-52 air surveillance with Japan's F-35s. Crazy. We should have been like this to send a direct message, but we didn't. And so at every level, I think this administration has made America weaker, more vulnerable, and has actually played into China's message to all the countries who were attempting to pull into the U.S. kind of gravitational pull.
So I think the MAGA retort would be, look, we said some mean things and defense spending in all these countries is going up now. What's not to like about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Japan, let's just deal with that, was increase their defense budget from the 9th largest to the 3rd largest when I was there. To their credit, and I don't deserve it, and the Biden administration doesn't deserve it. They did it early on, even before I got there. And so that wasn't, no disrespect, anything with President Trump. They committed 2%, and they did it in 5 years, and they were well on their way before President Trump ever put his right hand on the Bible. So calling offsides for what is not true. Second is they have done things in that defense budget, pre-Donald Trump, on kind of counter-strike capability. They just concluded a sale of ships to Australia, things that they constitutionally were prohibited to do. Also, pre-Trump. In fact, and their willingness to do it above the 2% of GDP, defense spending, is probably more out of fear of Donald Trump's failure to show up than it is because of prodding by the Trump administration. And that's also been true to the credit of the Korean new president. His first kind of set of conversations were with the Japanese because of their fear that the United States is AWOL. So it's just the facts don't bear out. And plus, everybody, I'm right about India. The Trump administration has totally punted on a bipartisan project that was succeeding and making China very nervous. Go look at what they were doing in the Himalayas. And they haven't showed up as it relates to the Philippines and the islands off the Philippines and the South China Sea. The last week, that is the Trump administration, validated the AUKUS submarine project between the United States, Great Britain, and Australia that all predates them as well. So if that's their argument, they better get some facts to back it up, because nothing across in 6 different countries adds up to that argument.
I think there's a part of this that is downstream of this MAGA worldview that America just isn't up for it anymore. What do you think about this whole idea of like defining down what America can accomplish on the global stage?
Well, first of all, I don't buy it. A superpower doesn't pick geographies, which is what they're trying to do. They failed with Canada. They failed with Panama. They failed with Greenland. We'll see what happens in Venezuela. The only place you could say they had a success was a $40 billion pledge to Argentina. In the middle of when they were cutting healthcare for the United States. So to me, I don't think it should be a hemispheric. Second is a superpower. Does that mean that they're going to pull stakes up on the Middle East, where Russia's now been kicked out and China's a bit player? And that is an important both geographic and strategic and resource-rich area. So to me, dumbing down or strategically pulling back only makes the world more dangerous. Now, there's reforms that should be made to the alliances. There's things that you should do. But as you and I are talking about this, for 40 years, the United States was telling Europe, don't get economically, energy-wise dependent on Russia. Now you have a document where the President of the United States is begging Europe to become more of a vassal, energy-wise, to Russia, which is in direct competition to our own energy policy and our own energy interests. So there's no intellect. Now, I'm a former ballet dancer, so I'm kind of flexible, but these guys redefine flexibility. Here you are saying, well, maybe we should dumb down or restrict ourselves. And you're telling Europe, get more dependent on Russia. And less dependent on Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Colorado. I can't think of anything more stupid than that. Second, in the Mideast, we have Russia having gotten kicked out of Syria. China has no play. It's a major geographic area strategically. It's a major purchaser of defense weapons. It's a major investor in America's economy. We have an ally both in Israel and in the Gulf countries, and also in the immediate Arab world. And that is to our strategic advantage. And so pulling back from that would make America more vulnerable politically, economically, and strategically. So I think it's foolish without touching the region of the world. Now, would I say that Latin America and Central America in American foreign policy over the years has been a stepchild? 100%. Focusing on it, the right thing to do, but not at the expense and America can walk, chew gum, and be a superpower that brings a strategic presence to our policies in the Indo-Pacific, as an example.
You know, when I was reading that national strategy document and I'm
Yes,
trying to make sense of it, and like, okay, you're trying to get in their worldview and you're trying to think about how serious it is. But at the same time, you got everyone's children making billions of dollars on the side, which I really think is a new thing in American history and is just makes it very hard to take this kind of like new grand vision of how they want America to play in the world all that seriously.
Well, look, I mean, you're asking, I saw this today, so let me, it's a pivot. In the Sinai, when they have the big signing in and around this ceasefire in Gaza, the Indonesian president says to Trump, I need to talk to Donald, the two boys. Very upfront about, I mean, got caught on tape. In the midst of while we're having a trade negotiation or a tariff negotiation, not trade, with them. If there's anything more blatant about this, it was that now we have a conflict or some problem in this this tariff negotiation, and we are mixing our strategic vision with President Trump's checkbook. They're not one and the same. Now, when I got to Congress, I set up a blind trust. First member to do it. Kept it as chief of staff. I had to re-up it and change it to meet the executive branch. Mayor, filled out massive financial forms as ambassador. In fact, I got an email about 4 months after I left, and it said you have to do your exit financial form. I said, you guys must be, really lonely because you're chasing me after I've left where I have no conflict. And you got a bunch of people who just left prison are now ambassadors.
Jesus Christ.
Okay? I don't know if you noticed, but they just left prison. Okay? So I filled out my form, etc. But you can go through the country. I'll take it. There was an announcement the other day, a startup company on one of the private equity funds from, I'm not sure which, the sons of Donald Trump, won a $700 million contract out of the Pentagon. A startup. They're investing. And I wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal that, the theory of the broken glass or broken windows is that small crimes create conditions for big crimes. And that's exactly been what, it's not just about streets, it's also about the corporate suite. And this is what the Trump administration has done. The kids of Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, Witkoff, the special advisor for everything and anything, and Donald Trump's kids. Their checkbook is bigger today, and yours is smaller today because they're conducting themselves to enrich themselves. And that is what's going on. And the only envy is for Donald Trump of Putin is that that's their business model, and he would like it to be America's model. And he has to work around some legal boundaries of which the Supreme Court continues to remove them for him. It is unbelievable to me what goes on here, having spent a lot of money with lawyers and accountants. And one of the things I'm proud about, starting from Bill Clinton forward, I've never hired a lawyer for anything I did when I was in public service. And what these guys are doing makes me feel like I was a schmuck. I've never seen anything like this. And nor has America in American history. We have a lot of competition. And I'm from the city of Chicago for corruption. But they have not only corrupted the in the sense of the money they're making in public policy, but they've corrupted the process of doing it.
It's there's big like 19th, really like 18th and 17th century, like European aristocracy, like the princes marrying each other and like doing deals on the side stuff.
Here's the thing. I forgot, the last 40 hours, 2 people were caught, ethics reports for not selling stock or whatever. Who's going to investigate them? The FTC, the SEC, the Antitrust Division of the Justice Department? The Supreme Court gave them a carte blanche to go steal. John Roberts and the rest of those hacks gave him a carte blanche. You basically can appoint members of they fired all the inspector generals. You can appoint or fire whoever you want at these independent agencies. You have a Justice Department, FBI, which is a bunch of, keystone cops. So of course people are going to break the law. You told them they get to write the law for themselves, and nobody will enforce it. That's what John Roberts did. The genius that he isn't.
I'm old enough to remember "drain the swamp."
Yeah,
That was a phrase.
Yeah.
And it won an election.
And what they decided was just to make the swamp a little bigger.
So I
mean, take India and Pakistan and take the strategic point here, because there's other things as it relates to the American family's checkbook is smaller than the Trump family checkbook. One is getting bigger, one is shrinking. But we have had a project from George Herbert Walker Bush to Bill Clinton to George Bush to Barack Obama to Donald Trump, one, to Joe Biden, to bring India into a closer strategic alliance. Because Modi had a desire, did not want to play stooge to Donald Trump. He made peace. Trump gets angry. Pakistan waves a bunch of contracts. The Financial Times has a great story about this on the crypto and mining for the Trump kids. And we've abandoned a 35 plus year project of America's strategic interest just so the two Trump boys can have a little gold coin. And that is what happened. And I stand by it.
So I would be remiss in not bringing up Hunter's pardon.
Bring it up.
I thought it was really gross. I thought it was really disappointing. And I actually thought he wouldn't do it because
listen, if you want me to live in a glass house before I throw a stone, I ain't doing it. Okay. I'm going to say this. Never hired a lawyer for something I did. I believe in what Kennedy said about public service. That is not the virtue of this White House, and they're stealing in broad daylight and getting away with it because John Roberts gave them a get out of jail card.
All right. Let's talk U.S. China. We had Liberation Day. We had Liberation Day V2. We had rare earths thrown on the table twice, and then the Trump administration backing off. What's your read on all this, Rahm?
So I have like 6 reads, but let me take a different route here.
Sure.
I mean, because the whole tariffs and Liberation Day was about, one day it was about drugs, and then it was about manufacturing, then, whatever. It's a missing target based on the day. And I think I don't disagree about the sense of desire to build America's industrial capacity. 3 points of fact that I think are more important, that are important to illustrating this. When the president walks in, there were 50,000 manufacturing jobs with help wanted signs. Nobody filled them. We would be 50,000 manufacturing jobs ahead today if we had focused on the training side, getting Americans ready to do those jobs. And we've lost jobs to the first another 50,000 under President Trump. Number 2, wasn't noticed, but 2 weeks ago, the CEO of Ford said he has thousands of jobs today empty, paying 6 figures because people don't have the job, mechanics, electricians, etc. So these are not in the corporate suite or in a corporate building. They're on the shop floor. Cannot fill them. And he says it's only going to grow. There's a story the other day, another 6-figure jobs. Story today about China ahead of us on energy production, etc. One of the big problems for us to compete with China on AI and the transmission, we are short 200,000 electricians. Every one of those are 6-figure jobs with healthcare and retirement. The merchant marines, which is key to building up both on economic and otherwise security, is short over the next decade, 200,000 jobs. So if we had focused the problem analysis, which is you needed industrial capacity and base in the United States to compete, is true. The tariffs and looking weak was like the lead of the top 5 choices. It was number 10. We have Americans looking for work, looking for the ability to buy a home, looking for the way for an economic independence. We have jobs that would give you a start on that economic independence, 6 figures. And every one of those companies is short workers. They don't have the workers for those jobs. Ford, 2 weeks ago, thousands of jobs, 6 figures, electricians. And here's what's we're worried about. Nobody covered what the CO for it said. It was like a little thing. I happened to see it on the side. Nobody. President Trump, 50,000 help wanted signs on manufacturing on the day he walks in. A hell of a lot better. We'd be a hell of a lot farther ahead on manufacturing rather than the tariffs, which are the most beautiful word in the English language. So to me, this was at a number of levels, the president continues to do this, which is he analyzes a problem, not wrong, not always right, but not wrong. And then his solution is far worse than the problem he started to try to solve. Far worse. Now, against China, made it look weaker, divided us from our allies, is telling Europe to buy oil from Russia and gas, not from us. At every level, and in fact, the oil and gas industry in America has fewer wells today, which means fewer people working, drilling those wells and transporting those wells and those pipes for it, than when he walked in. And even his drill baby drill strategy is failing. So I just find this immensely frustrating from an economic renaissance, because we have a challenge that actually is an opportunity, and our politics, and specifically how this administration is failing America and Americans.
So forward looking, I guess, we've had this rare earths saga.
Yeah.
It is clear that there are big parts of the U.S. economy which are now and probably will for the foreseeable future have large dependencies. Like the economic coercion playbook that China has is large and significant. So I guess, what is the international? Yeah. So what is like the international strategy to handle them? And also, how do you spend that money to start to ameliorate those vulnerabilities at home?
Look, the way I think about this is, and having been ambassador to Japan, the first critical minerals economic coercion playbook China starts is in 2010 with 2012 against Japan around the Senkaku Islands. Mm-hmm. The old playbook, we knew about it, didn't do squat, both parties. When it came to COVID and they withheld basic medical gloves, masks, etc., economic coercion up front. Now, that was more for their own self-preservation than it was just for punishing everybody else. This has been part of their playbook. Now, to me, you have to look across the system. And I wrote a piece in the Washington Post about we've had 5 helter-skelter national industrial policies. The auto bailout was a national industrial policy. What we did on chips and IRA under Biden was a national industrial policy. What we did during warp speed and COVID was an industrial policy. Now, there are some elements of a policy that are successful and others that aren't. But the first thing, and you quoted the National Security Council produces the NSS. I would have every year, or every administration beginning, the National Economic Council produce an economic blueprint. Looks out over the horizon. Here are our strengths, here's our weaknesses, here's our vulnerabilities. Today, it's obviously critical minerals and magnet production, but 4 years ago it was, and still is, semiconductor and the production of those semiconductor chips, etc., which was the impetus between the CHIPS Act and IRA coming out of chip wars, etc. But look through what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and what are the vulnerabilities, and then develop a strategy around that.
So there's
so to me, and then to take it into the step. Well, I'm not a fan of the metaphor of Cold War. China has decided that on quantum, AI, life sciences, fusion, alternative energy, they're going to kick our ass. They're not going to compete with America. They're going to try to beat it. You saw after COVID, their vaccine was a debacle. They make a decision that will be the last time. And now 5 years later, they are competing, if not in certain areas, superseding us on life sciences and new drugs. You can look at what they did on chips. You can look at what they're doing on alternative energy. This attack on America's research foundation, its university system, is an on goal of the worst kind. You won't see the pain today. You'll see the pain for the next decade. Donald Trump is leaving America far worse off. We should not concede any one of those areas. And I spent time as an ambassador helping on the area of quantum computing for America's competitiveness between Tokyo U, University of Chicago, and bringing IBM and Google in to fund that at $150 million. Pick the areas, compete and win. Our scientists and our funding mechanism, while not great, keeps us at the top of the game. We should not be trying to strangle MIT, Harvard, Stanford, University of Michigan, University of Illinois in competing and winning the innovation war against China. That's number one. Number two, the bronze behind the brains. We should be in a massive education for whether it's electricians, whether it's mechanics, whether it's so we have the capacity to compete. China's AI is getting more competitive, not because of innovation, just because their electricity is 50% cheaper than our electricity, because our transmission and our energy production way behind. And then third, beyond that, there is a place in the sense of kind of the regulatory reform. There's a place as it relates not to illegal immigration where there's consensus, but we should be very clear about legal immigration and bringing the best scientists and the best engineers and the best educated to the United States of America. So that's kind of and with, I mean, each one of them you require drilling down deeper into, but at 10,000 feet, that's what I would do.
I guess at a principle level, it's been very interesting to watch, 2009, 2010, you guys get streamed at for being socialists, saving GM and Ford. And now we have a Republican administration taking equity bites out of, we're doing national champions, I guess. What's your read on that? And then broadly, like, how far should the government go to be really messing with these private sector dynamics?
Well, you have golden shares in Nippon buying U.S. Steel as an example of that. You have the Intel 10%. And, I disagreed with Romney on this, and Senator Romney got then presidential candidate. He talked about GM and Chrysler going bankrupt, and we spent political capital and financial saving the auto industry in the United States for a reason. And yes, we were called then socialists. We were also called on healthcare socialists. It's a normal card. I suppose if you keep doing it, one day you may be right, but but anyway, and there was also
we'll see how many companies Zocron ends up buying.
Right, there's a case in this. What China has done is outright intellectual property theft, both some of it explicit and some of it on the corrupt level doing what they did to Google. But they invest in certain new technology companies, and they refuse those companies to raise money so they can bankrupt them and then steal all the patents or take the patents back to China. That is what they're doing. It's an active, strategic party, country, national strategy in the United States. They can't replicate the beauty of America's research and innovation and entrepreneurship, so they steal it through the front door, the back door, and through the kitchen window. They'll do that. That's what happens. And it's going on right now. And to me, that's where we've got to sharpen up. And then to your point about kind of socialism, I forgot the name of the company that out of Obama's Recovery Act, when we invested in it was a new technology with belly up,
like Solar City or something. Yeah. No, it wasn't solar. It was a solar firm though.
I forgot, but maybe it was a solar firm. I forgot what it was, but it was all like, oh my god. And here these guys are investing in putting public money in companies with zero operating capacity or whatever.
Solyndra.
That also has, what was it?
Solyndra.
Oh yeah,
firing those neurons.
I think I must. No, but I think I had a block. I don't pay enough on my therapy for it, but I think I had a block on it. But it's crazy. And now, I believe I'm more of a capitalist and a free marketer than the Trump administration and the Republican Party. And as the rest of the Democrats, we would never take economic stakes in company. And let me say this. We did bail out GM, Chrysler, and save the jobs and the communities that depend on it. We got our money back plus. But the goal was to get out, not to stay in and increase your ownership. Then we did it with AIG, and we got out and made a profit. Okay. But the goal was not to get in, stay in, and increase it. I mean, the Secretary of Commerce says we want now royalties for our public dollar investments. Now, I think there's a way you could pay a system that funds greater research, et cetera, but not what he's thinking. He's thinking about is ownership, which is the last thing you need. I mean, there's enough. I love politics. That's not the type of politics I want.
Here's a blast from the past. I was a press office intern in the Obama administration. It was during Solyndra, and I think it was summer 2012. And what you guys ended up doing was like letting journalists see every single email that was sent about it. And I had to sit in a room like minding all these Politico journalists. And so we've gone from that level of transparency to like, if like Sasha and Malia were on the board of Solyndra or something.
Let me just be really clear. One, us investing in a startup to jumpstart a technology in America. That was called socialism. Today, you have the United States investing in owning pieces of that. Yeah. Second, you had back then journalists who actually cared about what was going on. Today, if you did that, you get fired from your corporate leadership. It's because you were offensive to the president. So the world's gone full circle, and you're not crazy. It's just gone upside down.
Let's do the U.S. China piece a little bit. So this idea of like America losing escalation dominance. We had a Biden administration that was able to slowly, start to boil the frog when it came to a lot of these technology controls without necessarily having China snap back in an aggressive fashion that would affect America's economy. And now that dynamic has shifted. So what happens next, Ron? What's the smart play here?
Look, a lot of things I would do here is just be forthright and honest. I would tell China, you wanted to be strategic competitors, but you have decided you want to be a strategic adversary. You have decided to go in our entire infrastructure of our utilities, our waters, and our systems. You're also in our software, in our government agencies. That's not a competitor, that's an adversary. So if you want to go back to the competitive era, I'm ready. Everything you've done to endanger America, get out of here. We'll compete. But I will not do it, but we're going to go to a different level if you want to be adversaries. Two, in this challenge, we don't have an American to waste for our community to overlook. We made a mistake in 2012 thinking that Battle Creek can battle Beijing on their own. It's going to take an all-country effort. I'm talking about what Ford said. I talked to you about other industries that have job openings and nobody there to fill them. We have thousands of young men and women looking for purpose and looking for economic independence that every one of these jobs can do. So I would go on a massive training. And I would be clear both on the technological level and the strategic level to our allies. We have a certain period of time we have to buy. Our allies can play a bigger role in that effort so we can get to a point of competitiveness and a point of making China as deterred as they have done to us under President Trump. I mean, don't lose sight when you talked about Liberation Day and we backed up, how much degradation in our deterrence posture was created. When the president, after his talk with Xi, which he does first, then calls the prime minister of Japan our number one ally, our long pole, and never mentions Taiwan. And then for 2 weeks while China's intimidating Japan, we don't do anything. How much that deterrence gets degraded. And while it's being done to Japan, if you're in the Blue House in Korea, you're in Melbourne in Australia, you're in New Delhi in India, you're in Manila in the Philippines, you're looking at what the United States doesn't do with Japan, and you're saying, there for the grace of God goes eyes. So you start to buy your insurance policy. You start to look, okay, the United States can't be trusted. So what do I do? That's what's dangerous here.
The nuclear proliferation arc which we haven't quite seen yet, but I mean, it's coming, right?
As I wrote, when I got back early in February, I wrote this. I said, if you think non-proliferation was expensive, wait till you see the bill for proliferation. We spent a good time, not me directly, but in the region, convincing South Korea not to go independent on a nuclear. Made a lot of assurances to them. You look at what's happening now, it's going to be hard to convince South Korea, given North Korea and China, to stay much longer nuclear free. I'm not saying it's not possible, but they're going to look around. Part of their strategic overview is a nuclear and military guarantee and support from the United States. And you look at what's going on in the last year, you're going to sit there in the Blue House in Korea, South Korea, and Seoul and say, well, we can't keep this. Now, if South Korea was to go nuclear, other countries like Japan would sit there and go, wait a second. You have China building up nuclear capacity massively. North Korea. We know India and Pakistan. If you added in there South Korea and Japan, what could go wrong when 6 nations in a small geographic space, all who have 800 years of history and animosities, what could possibly go wrong? This is insane at every level.
We'll save the Iran, Saudi, UAE.
Can I say one thing that's underappreciated in the strategic world is and doesn't get a lot of coverage unless you're like a weirdo like me and read it. Iran is going through one of the biggest social, cultural revolutions since the Ayatollah walked in to Tehran in 1979. They're allowing concerts with the youth that they can't control. Women openly are totally disregarding the cultural norms of basically the ruling government. Because of a water shortage and the corruption, they're thinking of moving the capital out of Tehran. I get it. Tehran has a strategic vision of themselves in that Shiite arc from Tehran to Beirut. There is a slow boil implosion happening in Tehran right now. I don't know how it manifests itself. I don't know where the ball bounces, but there's a cultural revolution going on, and I use it revolution with a small r, not big, where, and given the demographics of the country is it's dominated by 30 and younger, that it's so much want to be part of the rest of the world, believe the ruling class is holding them back economically, politically, and culturally. There's something going on in Iran that in a year from now, or maybe 2, I'm going to look prescient saying what I just said.
Okay.
Something is happening there that we're not seeing. And one day we're going to wake up and say, who knew? But then you can't have a ruling class all of a sudden, because of political vulnerability, say to the kids, all right, you want to have all these concerts and go out and do all this that are not part of the norms? Go ahead. Well, once you do that, that genie's out of the bottle. And if that genie's out of the bottle, there's going to be another genie out of the bottle. That's the one thing we know from cultural history.
Sure. One more foreign policy one for you. Let's do a little bureaucratic reform talk. I mean, someone's gonna have to rebuild the civil service. What would you say you're Secretary of State 2029? What do you do with the place?
It's interesting you say this. So I'm down in Austin about 3 weeks ago. And so I grabbed lunch with 2 very, very good national security former generals, high up. I don't want to use their name. Don't want to get them in any trouble if they're doing any kind of advisory board for the government. Very smart people that I've worked with rose to the highest levels in their roles out of the national security institution in the United States. And I asked this question. So I said, okay, you got all this chaos. We all operated in this. If the opportunity here is you got a clean legal path.
Mm.
How would you reorganize this? Now, I was thinking, move this here, move that there, what the thrust behind your question, basically. I was in the same kind of zeitgeist that you are. It was interesting. Their response, I'm not saying they're right, but it was actually interesting. It's not what I expected. You hire good people at the top. It does two things: lifts morale and brings talent back in that's left. And he says, if you start changing things and moving furniture around, it's just all this energy on something else, when the immediate thing you have to do for the next couple of years is get the intellectual capacity back in. That means the top of the org chart, A, no B, no B minuses, no B pluses. You got to get A's. They'll get the morale up, and they'll get talent to come back in and do public service another way. I got to be honest, I was surprised because I thought, oh God, it's a clean slate. We could do this. They said from a capacity to run while you're fixing something, talent's the number one goal, and just do that. Everything else. They said some other things as it relates to, which are true, like the intel operation, intelligence capacity over the State Department, and the anti-terrorism, the financial end of the Treasury, both underappreciated in the intelligence world and swinging way above their weight class, and should be at the big boys' table, not at the kids' table anymore. So those were just two observations from the national security that I thought was
Sure.
I mean, I've been around it. I thought it was pretty persuasive. So I posit that that's how I would approach it. Go with A talent at the top, get morale up, and make it a magnet for other types of talent to come back in rather.
All right. Rapid fire round selling chips to China before we turn to domestic politics.
You mean like what the president just did?
Yeah.
No.
Great.
Okay. That was very, you said rapid fire. No.
Domestic politics around
he
AI.
He is the worst negotiator. I'm going to give you a story. We're negotiating a balanced budget. It's Erskine Bowles, it's myself, Gene Sperling, Bruce Reed, John Podesta, Sylvia Matthew. And I'm senior advisor. So one day, in the morning, I go to our Oval Office and I said, Mr. President, every night, Gingrich is calling you and you're giving away the store. We spend the first 3 hours clawing back stuff you're giving. I'm just going to tell you, if you're negotiating, rule one is the other side has to know that you can live with a no. You want to get to a yes? Everything you do is to convince the other side you are very comfortable with a no as much as you are with a yes. I said, we cannot have you. And I said, we're going to get to a balanced budget agreement. We have the upper hand here, but we are giving it away and diminishing it. It's all over. Anyway, the lesson here is Donald Trump is so solicitous of trying to get a deal. He is selling the family jewels to get it. And the Chinese know it. He's going to run around on some soybean, which is his problem, fentanyl, and a couple other things. I'm not disregarding the fentanyl issue, but he's so hungry for a deal, the Chinese are going to play it, and they're playing them now. And they haven't even gotten to a deal yet. And you can see it. They just gave away the chips. For what? What did you get? What? He gave away something he could have gotten at the table for something else. What did we get? They just did a military exercise with Russia around Japan, your ally, forcing you to come out of the closet and finally do your B-52 covers with the F-35s. What did you get for that chip deal? Bupkis, as my grandmother used to say. Bupkis. The worst negotiators I've ever seen.
Where do you think the Democratic Party is on China?
I think it's there's no uniformity. I think, there's rhetoric that you gotta, having spent some time, I could be wrong. I mean, I used to be of one view, and I've come to the conclusion that we have a fundamental problem. One, they're not strategic competitors, they're strategic adversaries. They're trying to bury us. Your competitors don't get buried into the infrastructure, technology infrastructure to destroy this country. After we ever get to something kinetic. They don't often we don't steal private information from government officials like they do. or steal from Google. We're not stealing Yahweh's IP. Second, we believe, until Trump, in the rule of law. They are open as part of their business model into economic espionage and intellectual property theft. It is very hard to have two economic models integrated where one believes in the rule of law and one believes the law doesn't apply. Third, our economy, even with the tariffs and Liberation Day, is integrated. The world is dependent on the American. Their economic model is the world becomes dependent on China, China becomes independent of the world. That is why they're exporting and crushing every other country's industrial base, developed or developing world, steals toys or EV cars. And it's very hard to have an integrated model where destroying the other side is, it's one thing if you want to trade, it's one thing if you want to compete. It's another thing if the goal is I win, you lose. There has never been a win-win in China's model. I don't say it, I'm angry at them. That's a fact, and now we got to figure out where we're going to go from here. Look, they just passed $1 trillion in trade, and their imports from other countries is down. South Korea's only steel plant closed. Chile's only steel plant closed. 20,000 jobs. That's not the United States, that's China. They're doing it across the board. If Europe doesn't protect itself, its auto industry destroyed. So the question is, we're on a win-win model. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. And they're on a win-lose model based on economic espionage and intellectual property theft. There's a case. They were stealing AI secrets from Google. ASML, which is in the Dutch, and it's they make the light manufacturing for chips. They were caught stealing intellectual property. I don't see, maybe I'm wrong, I have not seen our companies that are in the chip manufacturing stealing intellectual property from companies of other countries. Now, I'm willing to stand corrected and say you're wrong. There's suits that happen and things on patents, etc., but not outright government-sanctioned, governor-sponsored intellectual property theft. And an example of that, Tokyo Electron, that makes chip manufacturing machinery, competes against ASML. Neither one has been found cheating and stealing IP from the other. China has been caught stealing and cheating from both of those companies.
Rahm, your brother's got a role to play in all this. So Ari pitched, the UFC had like an event in China, and they took him to a robot demo. He said this is like a one-off on a podcast. Maybe we should have like American and Chinese robots fight in a cage. I think what America needs to see is our robots getting their asses handed to them. Because it's not as salient, right? Just how good China is getting at all these emerging technologies, because you don't see the cars on the road. Like, yeah, you're not really using the AI models. It's just like something that shows up in trade numbers and in factories closing here, there, and everywhere else. But like having that as a primetime thing on Paramount Plus, there's something to this, Rob.
Well, let me just say this, since I usually tell at the family meals in the holidays for Ari and Zeke to just shut up. I'll let Ari know that you think he has a good policy idea.
Okay.
But it will not come from me complimenting, because there's very little space I'll give Ari in the policy. Or politics. The worst thing to do is tell somebody in Hollywood, you have a good idea, because they think they're brilliant. Okay?
Unless you're George Clooney.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah. For another time. Domestic politics of AI. This dog hasn't really started biting yet. But by 2028, I mean, it's got to be one of the top three things, just from like education, social change, job displacement perspective alone. I don't know. What's you just pitched that we should be banning social media for kids under 16. What's your take on all this, Ron?
Well, I am spending my time. I got to be, you want to talk about kids' poverty? I got ideas, stuff. I'm learning about AI. I had a lunch today with somebody I consider very, very smart, between OpenAI and open weights, and that they're confused, and that the real problem challenge is in the open weights where there's no set of firm protocols. I want to be clear. I don't have the answer. I know it's important. I'm learning as we go. I'm trying to figure out who really knows their stuff, etc. What I can talk about, while AI is important to the future, to productivity, two kind of cautionary notes. One, we have to figure out our energy production in this United States, electricity. And China adopted the Obama all the above. We walked away from it in 2016 under drill baby drill, and we're now paying the price because our electricity costs are 2 times China's, because they decided to go with an all-in approach, and we decided to go with a singular approach. Full stop. Two, we're short the workforce to build out that energy capacity, to build out this chip capacity, and to build out the AI language capacity, because we don't have, from bronze to brain, the workforce we need to do that. And energy is going to be essential to the success, not just how small the chip is, how much energy you produce. Third, in this space, as it relates to AI, there will be the both one cautionary note on the last 30 years. While globalization and technology worked, it didn't work across the board. It worked for you, worked for me, but it didn't work for everybody. And if you want a new technology to benefit society, it has to benefit everybody in the society. And if it doesn't benefit everybody, then you got to figure out ways to ensure that there's a better level playing field. And we didn't. Doesn't mean that you could have stopped the clock and say, no internet, no trade. The question is, if you're going to go forward, how, to quote President Clinton, how everybody crosses the bridge to the 21st century. Everybody. Now, you don't have a queue where just some people make it and other people stand in line. And that's my cautionary note about AI, is it will have an impact on productivity. It will also have an impact on the people that lose their jobs because of that productivity. So the question is, what's the strategy behind that technology? Keep America competitive, but all Americans are part of that. And I don't have it figured out yet. And if I told you I did, I'd be full of crap. I know what the opportunities are. I know what the challenges are. Yeah. I know how we have to start to think about it. Who has got the best thoughts on it? I don't know.
A pitch for you. I guess 2 pitches for you on that.
Yeah.
Like the education adoption side is the piece I'm most worried about. I think the sort of productivity diffusion, like the free market's going to figure out how to make workers more impactful, do their jobs better, faster. But like the promise of having like the greatest tutor that humanity has ever invented, tailored to every single child, exactly where they are and their learning journey, is like a world historic opportunity. And like, you're talking about the haves and have-nots here. Like, I can absolutely, I mean, you've fought teachers unions in the past. Like, there's going to be a lot of mess and a lot of hesitancy and a lot of like, I don't know about this.
There's a lot of fear that's not illegitimate. I mean, look, I mean, I used to say, like, when I was mayor, we had the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the entire United States of America. And I said, what are we fighting about? You have great teachers. I want more time with the kids with the great teachers.
Yeah.
And I said, we had no kindergarten, no pre-K, no recess, and no lunchtime, and no gym time, and no arts class. What are you talking about here? It's a shorter school day, and the kids are being cheated. And I can't believe, I said to the head of the union, I said, I can't believe we're arguing about this. I said, we have no recess, no arts education. Reading is down to 40 minutes a day. We have no money for kindergarten, no money for pre-K, all the things that we took care of, etc., that we did get in the end. And I said, you believe in this. Why are we arguing? This makes no sense to me.
So when we did our first show, my wife was 5 months pregnant. We now have a 1.5-year-old. We spent this morning at preschool interviews for TWO's programs. And I came out a little nauseated because, as you're right, Rahm, I have resources that not everyone has in this city. And like, you know, walking through this incredible, like, place, which is, again, TWO's program, like pre-K starts for free in the U.S. when your kid is 4. So like, Like, they have the paints and they have ceramics, and literally the ceramics are from the nicest ceramic store that like you'd find in a $10 million apartment or something. And I'm sitting here, I'm just like this is gross. And it's going to be the same for middle and high school, but it's going to be an even bigger deal because like they're going to have access to like, $20,000 a month AI tutors. And
okay, when I became mayor, there was no kindergarten and no pre-K, universal. And we made every 5-year-old get a full day across the city, and every 4-year-old get a full day across the city. But the biggest accomplishment was on the other end, on the high school. Not that as an early childhood educator, this is what I wanted to do. I consider that landmark. We did 3 things in high school that we haven't really changed the high school since we first brought it along. 1, if you get a B average in high school, we made community college free, tuition, books, and transportation. 2, we brought college into high school, and 50% of our kids were graduating with college credit, so they didn't have to pay for it later on. And B, they got the confidence they could do college open class. And then C, the most important thing we did, those 2 are very important, to get and receive your high school diploma, you had to have shown us a letter from a college, community college, a branch of the armed forces, or a vocational school of acceptance. It was a requirement. 97.8% of our kids met that requirement. So when you walk on graduation day, you had to be able to show us where you're walking to. Not just your children who are child who is young. Mine are all grown up past those years. 2 are in the national, in the military. 1 full-time, 1's reserve. But they all went to college. They knew where they were going. I don't really care whether you're going to Michigan or bricklayers, or electrician, or Air Force, or Harold Washington Community College. I don't care. But you are not stopping when you're 17. And that to me was probably, well, the whole thing was worth the time in public life, and what we did on, as Stanford called, with Chicago public school system, were the top, biggest, the best of the big 100. The best. And I walked in, it was called by William Bennett the worst. But what we did in reforming, and I say we, meaning Dr. Janice Jackson, myself, reforming the high school years was fundamental to, I think, the alteration of these kids' lives. 20,000 kids went to community college for free. Free.
I got one more pitch and then final question. So you talked about banning social media. The other thing to watch, AI companions, like everyone's like, these AI are going to be better friends than people. And that is a whole different thing than what Instagram was.
I will keep my eye on it. I'm going to stay my battle on what I think, which is, look, Chicago, under my tenure, had the most restrictive policies on tobacco to teens. And we took teen smoking down to single digits. We, as I told you, what we did with pre-K, kindergarten, when I was senior advisor to President Clinton, I negotiated the children's health insurance for 10 million children whose parents worked but didn't have health care. So if it relates to kids and teens, that's where I'm going to have my energy. It's the future. That may be, my dad was a pediatrician. That may be my own desire, the emphasis of what I think is important. I'm not saying others aren't, but that's where I'm going to spend my time, even I'm ready to get, and I think given what Australia is doing, given what I think you can do technologically and turn the algorithm into an ally rather than an adversary, that's where I'm going to spend my time. I'm not saying that the issue you raised is not, but I am not diffusing my energy.
So everyone on these other podcasts asks you if you're running. They ask you about all the other Dem candidates. I want to talk about the Republican ones. So we're going to just go down the list. Kalshi has J.D. Vance at 50% to be the Republican nominee. What's your take?
Politics is crazy these days, but very hard to knock off a sitting vice president. So my guess is it's probably right.
And, how'd he do in the seat? I don't know. What do you think of him? Like, aside from electability, like, what do you think of him as a politician?
Likability is an important factor, and I think that's a vulnerability for him. And that's all I'll say.
Okay. Rubio, 9% right now.
Part of leadership, in my view, and I've said this repeatedly, you got to know why you're doing what you're doing and have the strength to get it done.
DeSantis,
you can infer from that anything you want.
DeSantis, 4%.
That's generous.
Tucker, also at 4%.
That's overly generous.
And how about Donald Jr. rounding out our top 5, also at 3%?
I can't wait for him to do the financial disclosure form.
Rahm Emanuel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of
Can I
ChinaTalk.
say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
I have 3 kids, 28, 27, and 25. You're about to experience the greatest journey of life with a lot of hits, a lot of misses, but you have 2 parents that was a role model, and you're going to be great at it, and it's going to be a great journey. Mazel tov.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.